Well, thank you both for sitting down with us. I think I want to start with talking about this coming school year. Schools can begin imposing a test as a graduation requirement, a civics test that takes at least 50 questions from the citizenship exam that you would go through the naturalization process. It's not a new idea. It's something we've heard about, but now schools starting this year will have the ability to do it. Then it has to conform to some things by 2019. Is this a good idea, Alan? Is this something that should have been done a long time ago?
Yeah, I have no issue with it at all. I think that we've gotten away from teaching civics and history like they did when I was growing up. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I think there are too many exemptions. There are too many people that can be actually exempted from it if you look at the law itself, which they did. And that's kind of too bad. And some of it has to do with people who are ESL, English second learners. But you know, I would encourage them to have most of the young people do it, because I don't think most people have, I guarantee most people, I'm talking about even our age, have even read the Declaration of Independence or any of that. So, yeah, I think it's important to do it.
Mike, what do you think of the idea of having this potentially as a graduation requirement?
Sure. I mean, I feel like I probably graduated out of a very similar education system that Alan did, where we used to call this civics. This used to be just a course that we all took. And it was a requirement to graduate, right? You had to you had to demonstrate this competency. You know, this year it's a may. Next year it transitions into a shall, right? Shall administer the test. You know, I don't think that it's necessarily you know, beyond the pale to have this kind of competency. I think it's very useful. I know it serves me well in my job. I'm sure it serves Alan well in his as well. You know, so it doesn't surprise me that you know, that we decided to do this. After all, you know, we do tend to reduce things down to tests these days. I think, you know, the only thing that Alan and I are going to disagree on here are going to be the exemptions. You know, I read the law also, and I thought the exemptions were fair. You've got a 10% of the graduating class, which, you know, maybe that's too high. You know, I don't know. I'm not an administrator. I don't make those kinds of decisions. But it's currently at 10%, which to me seems reasonable. And the only exemption for ELL students, other than the 10%, you know, is that if the school is incapable of providing that test in their native language, they can't. They'd receive an exemption. Mm-hmm. But since most of the schools, you know, here are at this point fairly, you know, used to dealing with ELL students, you know, I don't know that exemption is necessarily going to get utilized all that often.
How about the idea that it's the same? It has to be the same questions that somebody applying for citizenship and going through the naturalization process takes. Is it's kind of the idea that everybody has to know these same basic things. Do you agree with that idea? It should be the same across the board?
I have no issue with that at all. Again, you know, it's educating young people as to what this country's about. And that's not a bad thing. As a matter of fact, it's probably long overdue. And I mean, not only we called it civics, and they should be doing this, but we should be teaching a lot better history. Listen, they're talking about now getting rid of teaching history from before, I can't remember the date, but it was something to the effect of the before the 1600s or 1500s, something like that. They were going to ignore that in schools and just start with a certain date on forward. And I think that's a shame. I think it's important for people to understand, all people, regardless of your background, to understand where we all came from. So history, civics, these tests, I have no issue with it at all.
Let's talk a little bit about, we've talked a lot about the Russia investigation on this program, and Alan, you're here very often, so you talk about it. The Senate Select Committee on Intelligence released its report on Tuesday, looking into it, and as Alan has said, let the chips fall where they may. Let's have the investigation. So they came to some pretty big conclusions that Vladimir Putin so far was behind a lot of this. They say he directed it. Had a hand in directing this activity. It goes from cyber warfare to leadership intentions, propaganda, all kinds of stuff. Are you surprised, Mike, what's in the report?
Nothing in there surprised me. Alan, the very first time that I was on this program with Alan, we talked about this very topic. Nothing that I read in there was at all surprising to me. You know, my position on this is very much similar to Alan's. Is, you know, you let the chips fall where they may, and you run this down. You know, and for the record, I took the same posture on the Benghazi investigation, right? That when these things come up, you run them down. You go down the rabbit hole as far as it goes. And this particular rabbit hole led to, you know, some pretty, if you are not otherwise, I guess, kind of following this or informed on this, I think this is going to be stunning to a lot of people, right? That the codified revelations in here that were backed up both by the Intelligence Committee, or the Intelligence Community rather, and the Senate Select Committee. You know, the fact that they're corroborating everything, other than a tiny bit of daylight from the NSA, right? They were the only three-letter that kind of diverged a little bit, and that was basically a gap between absolute certitude and moderate certitude. But it was, you know, it's very, very demonstrative of you know, us entering into a new Cold War, right? And I don't know that that's necessarily surprising to anybody who pays attention to Vladimir Putin. Or anything that Russia does. I think this has been a long-term thing, as established, by the way, in the document, right? That this is part of a long-term strategy. So it's not surprising to me at all.
Specific to the election, they date back to getting into the DNC's database in 2015 as an example. I think, Alan, just your thoughts on what you saw here and maybe the implications, what you think the implications are of what you read.
Well, the only thing that I questioned was how they actually knew it was Putin that gave the orders. I mean, that's the only thing. I mean, that seemed to me to be kind of a guess. Now, having said that, listen, we've been adversaries with Russia, aka the Soviet Union, for all my life. And they have been trying to get involved in our elections in one way or another all my life. I mean, they've been doing this. They were funneling, the Soviet Union was funneling money to the tune of millions and millions of dollars to the CPUSA, Communist Party of the United States, back in the 50s, when people were saying on the left, oh, no, they weren't doing that. Well, when the Soviet Union fell and all the vaults were opened up and they found out it's all true, they've been funneling this money trying to subvert things going on here, elections and everything else. So am I surprised by this? Not in the least bit. Do other countries, including we, get involved with other countries trying to subvert elections? Listen, Barack Obama gave tons of money, millions, to the people to defeat Netanyahu, Bibi Netanyahu in Israel in an election just before Obama left the office of the presidency. So, I mean, yeah, do all countries get involved in this kind of a thing? To a degree. But what this says to me is that we've got to become better at combating this. So when it comes to cyber issues, when it comes to any of these other issues, we've got to become better. Now, you know, listen, I'm for the idea of being able to show voter IDs before you vote and really make things very tough on people to make sure that you are who you say you are to vote. And if you are, be my guest, and please exercise your constitutional right and vote. But we should not be allowing people to vote who don't vote. We should not be allowing people to get into our systems through cyber warfare and things like that. We've got to become much more vigilant that way. And I don't know, I don't know anybody, right or left, would disagree with almost anything that I said. We've got to become more vigilant, and this is absolutely displaying that.
I think this is where we will find the disagreement. Then the report shows that Russia clearly their intention was that Donald Trump would be more favorable to the Russian state. Hillary Clinton would not be. Donald Trump is the president. In your opinion, what they had did they accomplish what they wanted to do? Is Donald Trump more favorable to the Russian state than Hillary Clinton would have been?
I think that, number one, that is speculation, right? We don't know what Hillary Clinton would look like right now. That's pure speculation. In my speculation, you know, absolutely. You know, you're seeing a very, at least in the top line, friendly relationship developing now, right? Where traditionally, you know, again, my entire life has been an adversarial relationship, you know, with the USSR and Russia and the Russian Federation, right? This is, you know, I'm a Cold War kid. That's definitely my frame of reference. You know, so again, I don't know that there's a lot of daylight there. I think that they were probably a little surprised again, I think this is something that we talked about the very first time I was here as well, that, you know, I don't know that they necessarily thought that they would be as successful as they were, right? I think that this is a fairly low effort operation, right, on their end. It did not take a lot of you know, work hours necessarily to accomplish this result for them, and very, very low risk on a political scale, right? There's not that much of a price to pay for them. So I think it paid off in spades. Again, necessarily, you know, is there a preference? No, I think their preference is who could potentially be more disruptive, right? I don't know at the end of the day if you swap players out in this scenario, it goes any different, you know, necessarily based on who those players are. It's always going to be the one that's potentially most disruptive to, you know, America and the conversation that we're having internally in their estimation, right? Their goals. So again, I don't know that was necessarily a surprise to anybody.
Similar then, do you think that Russia got they got what they wanted, they got the better president for them?
Well, first of all, I don't want to give them credit for the election. I mean, we're going to give them too much credit that the election was won because of their involvement in it.
Without a doubt. No, and,
Right.
and again, and I certainly don't want to give them credit. No,
Right.
you know, from their perspective, their efforts, right, paid off for them. They did not necessarily, you know, win the election by any means. No, they had a successful cyber warfare operation, right, where their ends were met. So,
but what's going on now is, and you're right, the election was won because, I mean, you know, Donald Trump had pollsters telling him where to go in these small little enclaves, and people said, "What are you going there for?" And Hillary Clinton was taking the last few weeks off, not doing well physically. So, I mean, he won the Electoral College, she lost, and that was the end of the story. But again, you're right. I don't want to credit the Russians with that victory, but what I want to say is that that Donald Trump has been a president that has reached out to some of our adversaries, obviously, where we may not have expected him to do it. He did it with Kim Jong-un, and now he's doing the same thing with Putin, meeting Putin later in the week, next week, and I understand that he can do that. You know, it takes sometimes people on the opposite side of the political spectrum to do that reaching out. Example, of course, was the most prominent example was Richard Nixon reaching out to Red China when you know, our associates was Taiwan, and yet he reached out to Red China and basically threw Taiwan under the bus. You know, that was Nixon as the Republican doing that, you know, with the communists. I mean, so I think you're seeing a similar situation with Trump meeting Putin, meeting Kim Jong-un, having a conversation that both sides said was civil with the new socialist president of Mexico. I mean, both of them came away going, yeah, it was a very a civil conversation, because in the election itself, I'm talking about during the election process, leading up to the election, the guy who won, and I forget his name, but the guy who won was talking about, we're going to send people all over the border, we're going to really get in Trump's face. And all of a sudden you have the two of them talking civilly on the phone on the night of the election. So, you know, sometimes it takes people on the opposite side to go ahead and be able to reach out and accomplish this sense of getting along.
So you don't think it would have progressed, things right now would have progressed the same way had the election turned out different?
Wow. You know what? Like you, I don't want to speculate on that because I don't know. I mean, listen, I don't trust Hillary Clinton. I never did. Benghazi is a good reason. About another 50,000 reasons are good reasons. I mean, I just, you know, so I don't trust her. I don't know what she would have done. But, you know, there could have been some surprises there. I'm glad she's not there. I'm glad that Trump is in. I'm glad that he's doing what he's doing. And so only thing we can do is sit back and watch this whole thing play out. And when he meets with Putin, find out exactly how they're able to get along or not. Because like you, Russia's always been an adversary, and you know what? They still will be to a great degree. I mean, going into space and everything like that. We've always been competitive, and that's been okay. Not okay to try to screw with our elections, but then again, we've done the same thing. So. And
if you want to follow, you mentioned earlier you didn't want to speculate, but do you think it may be things on the foreign affairs level may have played out differently?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right. Again, and I think that's evident in their want in this particular election to meddle in this way, right? To meddle in a non-trivial way. Clearly, it was important to them, right? Who came out the winner in this instance. You know, so again, I think that, yeah, we absolutely would see a difference. What that difference necessarily was is, again, hard to say. That's pure speculation at this point. But again, I also think that it's very naive to say that we would not see any sort of difference between the foreign policy of a Trump administration versus a Clinton administration. I mean, you know, substantial differences. Necessarily what those would be, you know, again, is absolute speculation. So.
Well, the president rescinded a policy that accounts for race in college admissions this week. This was a big talker. Alan, what did you think of the move?
Well, it's about time. I mean, we've had this positive sense of racism going on for a long time, where you had to mention people's race. When I was growing up again, you know, people were kept out of colleges because of race, and that was horrendously wrong, bigoted, and should have been changed. And then we got into this quote-unquote affirmative action, which basically was reverse racism, saying now you have to admit so many people. A lot of the reason that this is coming about partially is because what's going on with the Asian students who are now suing because they were kept out of, and my mind slips about the university, but they were kept out of the college because they were Asian. What they had to do was they had to perform at a higher level. So if they performed at the same level as white students, they would not get in. They had to perform at a higher level. They were told that. Now there's a lawsuit going on with them against the college to be able to battle that. And so I think this goes hand in hand. I'm talking about the decision from Jeff Sessions and the administration. It goes hand in hand with that lawsuit. And as the phrase we both use, but letting the chips fall where they may, let those people apply who apply, regardless of race, religion, color, ethnicity, and those people who are worthy of getting in, get in. Those who don't, go to the equivalent of would be like a 2-year or a junior or community college. I did, by the way. I started out at community college too, and you know, wound up going to state colleges, getting my degrees and everything. So I don't see an issue about people everybody not going to USC and Stanford and the like.
What do you think of the change?
You know, again, I think it's demonstrative of the now blatant racism that we've seen out of this administration, right? I do think it is a very racist decision. We went from blatantly excluding people when you were growing up to merely excluding them passively when I was growing up, and this is why we ended up in these policies. You know, quotas are still illegal, right? They have been illegal. This is not about necessarily filling a bar. And by the way, what's happening with those students, because I'm familiar with the case but cannot remember the institution either, yeah. I think that's abhorrent, right? That, by the way, that is also racist, right? That's absolutely 100%, right? Expecting them to perform you know, to this model minority right. Ideas is absolutely just as racist as excluding somebody for their last name. You know, again, I find that to be absolutely abhorrent. You know, but these policies were not put in place by accident, right? These policies are put in place to address actual structural racism, where something like your name or you know your perceived ethnicity, right, can keep you out for arbitrary reasons, right? Because you didn't perform high enough above what the average was, or your name isn't spelled, you know, the way that I think it should be. You know, and these policies help to address that. You know, so do I disagree with it? Yeah, no, absolutely. But again, this is a policy change. This is what happens when you lose elections, right? You lose these policy fights that can be decided, you know, by fiat, right? By the stroke of a pen. So what's done in ways like this, again, as the left is learning right now, can be very swiftly undone by another administration. So it's very troubling in the short term. you know, it will definitely hold people back for a period of time, but it's very easy to address, right? It's easy to address at the election.
The actual aspect of this was, you're right about using the pen, which Trump has done to undo this, but that was based upon Obama using the pen. It wasn't all affirmative action. What it was a mandate by the Obama administration to absolutely include the issue of race when considering admissions for people. So, and like I would happen to agree that that is not, that what Obama did was racist, and what this administration has done is reverse that affirmative racism that came about during the Obama years. Obama had the chance, as first black president, although Clinton kind of was, right? But he was the first black president, Obama. He had the chance to really go ahead and bring the country together, and he failed to do so. And I'm not suggesting that under Trump he's bringing the country together either, but I am suggesting that he's reversing an overtly racist policy. And when you reverse a racist policy like this, it's weird that you're called a racist, because you want to be able to admit people based upon their qualifications as opposed to their last name or the color of their skin or their ethnicity. So that's how I'm saying. I applaud the administration for doing this.
I mean, it's always fascinating to me, the hairs that we split on these things, Alan. You know, again, it is exactly this type of policy that exists to stop that exclusion, right? That structural exclusion. So, you know, again, we agree on the racism. We disagree apparently on which side the racism is coming from in this. But we both definitely agree on the, you know, the dangers of legislating via the executive, right? By executive choice. So.
So it's interesting. I hear kind of this is undoing a correction versus maybe perhaps there was an overcorrection that has been undone. That's kind of what I'm hearing, just as a real top-level analysis. I don't know if that's accurate.
I think there was an attempt. You know, they say the pathway to hell is paved with good intentions, and I think that you can look at affirmative action and you can include that kind of a concept. People realize, rightfully so, that again, people were being excluded because of race and perhaps religion and other issues. Wrong to do it. We don't. None of us will disagree with that. So I think what they tried to do was overcorrect it, and they did. You got to be careful. You know, if you're driving in a car and you pull a little too far to the one side and you try to overcorrect, you can wind up, you know, overcorrecting into traffic and getting yourself in an accident. And that's what I think affirmative action was a major accident. And I think what this administration has done was say, no, we got to drive more evenly down the middle of the road and admit people based upon their qualifications and not discriminate based on race, religion, or color, pro or con, exclude or include based upon those issues. Do it on the qualifications of the individual.
Let's quick picks here. So obviously we're talking about SCOTUS. We have a list of names, 25 names. The president going through, he's narrowed it down. Any guesses as to who he might go with, or specifically which direction he might go? Yeah,
I mean, I feel like at this point, Amy Coney Barrett is a clear front runner right now. Her being nominated gives a lot of effective cover against any kind of pushback or resistance to her confirmation. So I think she's a smart choice for the president as a jurist, and she's a smart choice for him politically. You know, in that it makes a situation to fight against her a little more complicated. So yeah, I think that's a definite short list. Any of the justices that had clerked for Kennedy, I think that is more to mollify Kennedy into his decision to step aside, honestly. You know, I think somebody like Amul Tapur is another interesting choice that you know would complicate resisting a confirmation for my side as well. Yeah, really my top two would be Tapur and Amy Coney Barrett.
Climb inside the president's head. Which way do you think he's going?
You know, I think Barrett is certainly a prime choice. A lot of reasons. She's a female, and she is articulate, and she is a jurist. I know he was considering it, the idea at this point. I know on Monday it's being released who he's going to be nominating, but I know he's considering Mike Lee. Yeah. Now I happen to like Mike Lee as a person,
right.
as a legislator, but he's never been a jurist.
He's not a jurist.
So that did not make any sense to me at all. When you have someone like Barrett out there, the important thing for me, and I know this is what you're not going to, and that is, of course, that he's going to be getting a conservative on the court. Okay. And there will be, and a definite conservative as opposed to Kennedy, who, you know, kind of was going with the wind, even though he was put on the court by Ronald Reagan. My concern is that we've got to get her on, or somebody who's conservative. It's going to be it'll be a tough road to go when it comes to trying to get her qualified from the Senate, because you're going to have people like Dianne Feinstein who are going to come around and scream and yell. She didn't like her to begin with when she was nominated to her current position because she's Catholic. That was an issue, and they're going to have to avoid the whole discussion about R.V. Wade, because that's what you've heard people say. Well, the conservatives are going to get on what's happened. R.V. Wade is gone. Gay rights gone. Health care, Obamacare gone. I mean, all that's there. People are tearing their hair out. And I want a conservative court. My concern is, and I know this is not on your list of topics, but my concern really is that you have many prominent Democrat journalists now, liberals, who are out there saying, fine, go ahead and do what you want. Because when the Democrats take over Congress and the presidency someday, we're going to go ahead and pack the Supreme Court. The last time this was done was 1869, when they decided to go ahead and have 9 people on the court. And the last person who tried to pack the court was Franklin Roosevelt, and he failed. But what they want to do is add 2 more seats to the court and immediately confirm 2 far lefties on the court, which would give the sway to the left. Now, these are prominent journalists from the left who are promoting this idea. So far, no left-wing politicians have picked up on it. But I think for anybody who believes in the Constitution and believes in following, you know, the rule of law, it should scare you.
So is the reaction to Kennedy's retirement and potentially down the line, has it been too harsh?
No, not at all. Actually, this is this is a major fight, and I think both sides realize that this is an absolute all hands on deck moment. And you know, unless your name is Dean Heller, this retirement was a little bit of a surprise, right? Most of us weren't necessarily privy to Kennedy's timeline, right? So yeah, no, it was a little bit of a surprise. I don't necessarily think that you know, that there was a lot of preparation. So no, it's an all hands on deck fight, and it's a major one, right? It is. You know, the reason why you're hearing these things, and I wish I was included on that memo about the court packing, that would have been fascinating. But the reason why you're hearing things like this is because it is that severe, right? It is that important. You know, the court, no matter the capacity that you see it, holds major sway over the course of the way that every single American, you know, lives their life. And so, no, I don't think the reaction and as Alan put it, the hair pulling is out of line. You know, absolutely not. This is something that has the ability to impact people's lives in very, very direct ways for the rest of everyone here's life, probably for the rest of my child's life as well.
Well, I agree with that. I think it's a big issue, and I think that who we have in the court and how the court comes down on certain issues is proven by the decisions that have come down in the last few weeks. I mean, regarding union being forced to pay union dues and some of the other issues that have been out there. I think immigration, you know, the upholding the president's right. I mean, all this has been very, very important, and we want to continue in the tradition of upholding the Constitution, as I believe it's got to be upheld. And so I agree with you. It is a fight on both sides. In the end, my prediction, because you asked prediction, my prediction is that they will wind up, he will wind up getting someone confirmed, and it'll be done before before the fall. I mean, they'll have to do this throughout the summer now. They'll be McConnell will keep them in session and to make sure that this is accomplished. And Dean Heller will vote for the whoever the candidate is.
Yeah, that's something that we can both. It wouldn't matter who that was. He was going to do that anyway.
All right, let's leave it there this week, both of you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.